let me see if I could find it. Let me share my screen because today we want to go through. I want to go through the syllabus. Is this the syllabus course? Caribbean. Here we go. And I want to go through the syllabus with you guys today. Let me share my screen. Share my screen with you, Caribbean. Just it.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Danielle. How are you?
So sorry, I could not respond earlier. I'm driving. So I'm just able to respond now because I'm off the meeting. But I'm good, thank you. I'm just letting
Okay.
you know I'm here still, but I am driving.
Okay.
Oh,
All right. But what? How? I have anybody? I know Gavion said she can't. Gavion can't make it, but I know there are others. I know there is Matthews not here. I don't know what's going on with him. Anybody know why the other students aren't here?
Good evening. Good afternoon. Sorry to
Good afternoon, Felmin. How are you?
tired, but I here just pick up my daughter from school and I'm going to the doctor directly with her now. So busy, and tired.
Oh wow. Well, today we wanted to go. We have a lot to cover.
Yes.
Hopefully we can get to cover what we need to cover. Actually, let me. There we go. That's better. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. By the way, last week I asked you guys questions about first generation American, second generation. I don't think I answered the question. If I'm originally from Jamaica and I came to the US, became a natural citizen and have kids, what would my kids be considered first, second, third, or fourth generation Americans? Some of you said first, some said second. The answer would be they'll be considered first generation Americans because they would be I'm the original. I'm the original. I'm the original. So the original, and I wasn't born here. I came from somewhere. So I'll be the original, and whatever stems from me will be the first generation of Americans. But that's in relation to. I asked that question in relation as a brain teaser, and in relation and as it relates to connections or thread. I think connections and threads are very important because it helps to establish one's identity. Your roots is very important. And if you study the US and the Americas, there are roots all over the Caribbean that goes far back to the Caribbean and to Africa. And so it's important. We're studying Caribbean, but the study of the Caribbean does not exclude the connections that we have as part of a whole. Okay, as part, and we talk about the New World, the Caribbean as part of the New World, the West Indies as part of the New World. We talk about one of the things that connects people of the New World and people of the Caribbean is the issue, Christopher Columbus, or the arrival of the Europeans to the Caribbean, and the fact that people's and the transatlantic experience of bringing people from Africa to the Caribbean. But not just that, in the 1800s, when slavery was abolished, especially within the English-speaking Caribbean, we find that many slaves left the plantations, and as a result, because of that, they had to bring people from indentured laborers, bond servants, we call them bond servants. They weren't necessarily slaves, but in a sense, they were slaves. They were bonded over a period of time to work off to work off their debt, so to work off whatever crime they had committed or whatever the case might be. So they worked off their debt, and so people from India and people from China came to the Caribbean, especially in the 1800s or the 1860s. There was a lot of people that came. So and if you study the dynamics or the peoples within throughout the Caribbean, look the people who live in Suriname, the people who live in Jamaica as against those in Barbados, and a lot of the plantocracy remained in Barbados after independence and slavery was abolished. A lot of the plantocracy, so they talk about a lot of mixture, browning, the complexity of the people that live in Barbados. A lot of brown people in Trinidad and Tobago. You find it's a 50% African, 50% of Indian heritage. But anyway, but we talk those questions. So anyway, I asked those questions because it's very important once we begin to study Caribbean as part of the New World. Today's class, we want to quickly look at the syllabus. Just so you know, class 1 and class 2. Class 1 will be available later on today, probably within about an hour or two. Class 1 will be available. It's about 34 minutes. It's available on the YouTube feed on Caribbean Thought Lectures. And I post a link to the YouTube lecture series on the JTS online platform. So if you go to Caribbean Thought, to the JTS online platform and click on and look at the resources, you will see where I click the link to the YouTube lecture series of previous classes, and the one that the last two that we did. One will be available today, the other one will be available probably later on this evening or by tomorrow. This class today won't be available until probably Sunday, or depending on how quickly we can get it out. But I'm gonna ask you to just watch the videos of the classes and so on, just to keep abreast of what's going on. But today's class, and by the way, we're gonna quickly go through the syllabus because I think I need to do that. 1 and 2, I want to but I actually prepared a lecture for today's class, and it is available in academia.edu. I have a tendency of writing and posting the writings up on my feeds and so on, so because I believe in making popular what was the monopoly. So students and anybody who wants to learn and empower their minds and themselves can have access to the materials. Okay, so if you go to my ResearchGate page, it's available. If you go to academia.edu, it's available. But it's also available at if you go to JTS Online and you click on the week 2 or week 3 lecture, it's available as well, the actual lecture presentation with references and links. But we're going to go through, hopefully we'll be able to go through the entire document or the lecture that I have prepared for you today. But first, let us look at the syllabus. Let's go through the syllabus real quickly. Of course, the course is called Caribbean Thought. It's part of Caribbean. We do Caribbean Studies, but I don't want you to think of it as Caribbean Studies. It's broader than Caribbean Studies, okay? Because notice the word thought, Caribbean Thought, okay? Because so it's not just, we're not doing social studies. We're doing higher level thinking. We're doing critical thinking into what pertains to Caribbean study. We could be studying the study of Caribbean study or the discipline of Caribbean study, okay? But the course is Caribbean Thought, and it's a 2200 level course. That's very important. The level is important. It could be a 1000 level course. It's kind of introductory, but it's not necessarily introductory. It's a 2nd or 3rd level course. And it provides 3 credits. If we're to describe the course focuses on and explores the diverse currents of Caribbean thought, which have influenced the development of Caribbean societies. Again, we're studying diverse currents, and I like the word currents and the word diverse. Okay, because when we look at Caribbean, we can't look at it as a monolithic entity. Okay, but the Caribbean as a diverse entity, irrespective of the fact that we all have this transatlantic African heritage, but there is also now we are going to be looking at also the indigenous heritage of the Aboriginals, the Taino people, the heritage or the hybridized heritage stemming from the mixture or the admixture of European cultures as well, to what we have today. But we're studying diverse currents, diverse peoples and thinkings of Caribbean thought, which have influenced the development of Caribbean societies, from colonialism to independence and beyond. Well, it says from colonialism, which started from when Christopher Columbus discovered the Caribbean in 1492, between 1492 and 1494, to the Caribbean. We're not just talking about Jamaica. So we're talking about, but from colonialism, but it could be from before that, when the Spanish came. So are we talking about 1492? Or are we talking about 1565 when the British came here? Okay, are we to study it from the Arawaks, from even prior to colonialism, what pertains? Because we talk about the Caribbean being an invention, and I said the Caribbean today, what the Caribbean today stems from what happened in the 1960s of independence, or probably, but from before that, from colonization, from the 1400s, okay, or from the 1500s, or even before that, when the Taino people, or the American Indians, traversed this land. But and I talk about the fact that the Caribbean represents a place that is hybridized and diverse. If you, I think if you go to, I said that is this it? In the course outline, the course focuses and explores the diverse currents of Caribbean thought, which have influenced the development of Caribbean societies from colonialism to independence and beyond. It traces the history of resistance. And examines the quest for equality and the challenge of defining Caribbean identity within this post-colonial and neoliberal globalized world, not just within the geographic sense, but also in terms of a diaspora. It will challenge you students to develop and express your own critical thinking as Caribbean people within a unique way that helps to realize and further develop the hope of a free, independent Caribbean that is bursting with hope and opportunity. But of course, the course understands that it requires that students begin to critique and explore their own thinking, your own thinking, in deeply esoteric and critical ways that deconstructs history and philosophy. So at the end, you will create your own Caribbean thought, leading to a Caribbean academic journal of young academic and future scholars. So the course will make you estranged from self, but it is geared towards getting you out of your bubble and to consider issues that will make you uncomfortable. There's one other thought that I have to bring up here, which I made an announcement earlier, which I wanted to share something that I wrote some time ago. Here we go. Because I asked, one of the questions that we're going to consider for the course is, what is the Caribbean? What is the Caribbean? The course, we will have to ask that question. What is the Caribbean? Okay. And if you read my introduction on the JTS online platform, you hear me say that this is my 6th time teaching the course, and it will continue to explore diverse currents. But in addition to that, in addition to focusing on the development of Caribbean societies and peoples, because in looking at diverse currents, we're looking at the development of Caribbean societies and people and the impact of the past on our present experiences, and to reimagine a better future if the current one still requires change. The course will most definitely consider the foundations of knowledge and how this has evolved into the human dynamic that create the Caribbean position. I said that life is about people and how people relate. Life is about people and how people relate. Yet, there are those people who have made life out of something that it is not. Yeah, in fact, okay. Actually, let me go to the statement that I'm referring to. I can't remember the statement, but if I could bring it up here, nah, that's not what it is. I'm trying to find a statement about life that I had wrote some time ago, which I think it's worthwhile sharing here about life.
Okay, sir, I don't want to break your train of thought.
Go ahead.
But that was a very strong statement.
About what? About what? What statement?
People making life something that life is not. Like, that is such a loaded statement. So if you can, I would like you to expound on what you mean.
Yes. Hold on. I'm trying to find. I'm writing. It's part of a writing that I'm doing, but I said something to that effect. Hold on. Let me expound on that some more for you. Okay, here we go. That made this thing so different. I'm sorry, hold on a second. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. What? Let's pause this. They've made this thing so different now. Okay, fine. Let me go to another page. Let's go to let's go to this. Here we go. Let's go to I want to say it back to exactly how I've written it, because how I've written it is quite profound. Which where is it? Here we go. I think it's on this. This is what I've said. I have said that life is about people and how people relate. Yet life is what we make it or allow others to make of it for us, thereby creating privileges. Let me say that again. Life is about people and how people relate. Life is about people and how people relate. That's very important. Yet, life is what we make it or allow others to make of it for us, creating privileges. And that's a very important point, because I make that point because I'm going to talk to you about later on about the Black position. we talk about the Caribbean being an invention. We talk about classes in society. We talk about the strategy of globalization and the ceremonies of independence. The former prime minister, the foreign minister of South Africa recently made a statement which I carried in one of our shows some time ago, and in an editorial, and I'm including it in a book, talking about Pharisicalism, the issue of, and that's what we talk about in neoliberal globalization, Reconsidered, the issue of Pharisicalism, okay? The issue of looking at society and how society is created, the issue of institutions and institutionalism, which we're going to get into in this class when we begin to talk about critical thinking. And that is why critical thinking is important. It is a recognition that what we see today and the society we live in is a society that is created, okay, created in a certain way that allows for certain people to enjoy certain privileges, which continues in an historical fashion today. And institutions such as church, such as school, such as intellectualism, societal institutions are created to continue a kind of knowledge, to continue a kind of life, to continue the status quo. And if you study society, if you got to say, for example, talk about the constitution of a society is important. Britain does not have a constitution because they have certain norms and values that they follow, but it's a monarchical society based on rules and privileges and so on and so forth. So when we study society and when we start to look at the problem of realizing truth, the problem of anything, and I have this book here today, Antonio Gramsci, Prison Notebook. He said, this is a very important book. He said in the book, in his prison notebook, he said, the central argument of Gramsci's essays on the formation of the intellectuals is simple. The notion of the intellectuals as a distinct social category, independent of class, is a myth. All men are potentially intellectuals in the sense of having an intellect and using it, but not all are intellectuals by social function. Intellectuals in the functional sense fall into two groups. Antonio Gramsci, in his prison notebook, does not believe in an intellectualism that is based in nurture. It is based on nature. And the point I make about life is what you make it. If you read the book, I referenced this last class. Kant says that history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. In other words, the history of man, as purported by man, is written by a man within a milieu that projects his posture. I say to people, when you study the Bible was written at a time that promoted masculinity over any other sex. The male was dominant. It was written within a masculine frame. And you know, when you study, some of you who study Bible and theology, and so when they talk about hermeneutics, looking at the context of anything, you study the context. And when you start to study various societies and how societies change from epochs to epoch, you find that human natures or circumstances, whatever is happening in the day, or whatever is the driving or winning point of the day, becomes the institutional framework that all must subscribe to without question. But when we say that life is about people, because indeed that's what life is. Life is about people and how people relate. And if you study society today and the dynamics of society, I talk about what is the Caribbean in relation to the global North and the global South. In other words, and we talk about what is the Black position in the world. The Black position in the world, okay, is one of lack, the one of dependency. And wherever you find Black people is one of lack. And you know, and Walter Rodney wrote the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Europe today how Africa was underdeveloped by Europe. And if you study African societies today, or a lot of African societies today, it is made within the molds of the former master. Okay, and the dynamics, the way in which people relate in society, how classes relate, the upper classes, the middle classes, and the lower classes. The fact that the way in which we look at society, and in Jamaica, we find there's a class is based on one's education, okay, education or occupation, but but all internal economy, all internal societies, okay, have, even within the Black community in the US and in post-industrial communities, there is still an occupational class, but there is still also a browning, yes, a racial complexity that determines one's proximity to wealth and to status. Okay, but I said to you, life is what people make it. Life is about people and how people relate in that society. But the relationship in society is not based on nurture, it's based on human nature. It is you, it is I that have come to create society. And I said to people, what people have done, people create huge walls put up huge walls in their life that they can't even jump over. And that creates complexity and problems. Many people commit suicide. The problems that we have in society today also stems from what we have made of life. We have made life so complex. Yes, Jesus said at one point, give to Caesar what is due unto Caesar. Okay, recognizing that the life that we are living and what we are called to live, well, it is as if we are living it as unto man, which has nothing to do with any created or space. We talk about man-made life, the life that we have. And then we said that what men have done throughout history, if throughout history, is that they have created life, and then what they have done is before the Renaissance and the Reformation, they appealed to God. In other words, their position, monarchical power was based on a birthright that came down from God. They appealed to theology. But as society changes over time, when now men appeal to science, how educated you are, how well versed you are in science and technology will determine your ability and your position in life. But anyways, that's not what I'm on. Okay, that's not what I don't want to go off tangent here because we have a lot to cover. But we will get back into that when we talk about life is what you make it or allow others to make of it for you. Life is what you make it. Life is how people relate. Okay, life is how people relate. Life is what you make it and how you relate in that. How your relationship now, and also once you understand that, then you will understand that you can allow others to make of it for what it is not or what it is. But we'll talk about that later on. But we will explore that as we get into the course. The course surveys the history and philosophy of the Caribbean and the ways in which the Caribbean has emerged as a society in the shadow of colonialism and the emergence of neoliberal globalization. I use the word neoliberal globalization a lot. We'll talk about that. I won't talk about it now, but neoliberal globalization, because I'm going to talk about the fact, and the book that our textbook talks about neoliberal globalization. The irony of globalization was that when we got independence, when Caribbean countries, when we were getting independence, what was happening at the time in the 1960s? We were speeding towards globalization. We were speeding towards globalization, and I call that the irony of globalization, of freedom and independence. The irony. And if you know what, if you guys study irony is very important. Okay, the opposite of something, the irony of, because when little did they know, when you study irony, little did these nationalists know, little did the nationalists know what was happening. They are clamoring for independence. What kind of independence? An independence of sovereign nations and states. Okay, they were clamoring for a nation of borders where they have their own government of the people, by the people, within their own locale. But what was happening in the world in the 1960s and 70s? The world is moving towards globalization. And in order to facilitate globalization, nationalist thinking have to give way to that kind of, because globalization involves the crossing of borders, but we also recognize that we live in what? A competitive world. We live in a what? A competitive world. The world was always about competition. From colonialism, it was about competition. Europe, all the European countries were racing to find gold. They were racing to become the most dominant country. They were racing to be the dominant country in sugar. Yes? What was going on in Africa? They were also competing because all the African countries, they were competing against each other. And I'm not going to use the word tribe. I'm going to use the word country. Or the African peoples, they didn't consider themselves Africans in the sense that because there was no race. Before the concept of race, Africans didn't consider or think in terms of race. Okay? They thought in terms of nation. And they all competed, and the opportunity to outduel and outmaneuver the other tribe was salacious to them. When the Europeans came and put to each African nation the idea of give us slaves that you get from the other African tribes, and we'll give you guns and you'll be able to dominate Africa. And they said, wow, this is great. Yes. But the thing is, it was strategic. The deal that was struck between Europe or the European country and the African country was struck between all this. So that's what created pandemonium in Africa, you know, because they promised all these African nations guns, and they all got guns fighting against each other, trying to get slaves to give to the Europeans, and they wanted the best slaves. They didn't want they wanted the best slaves. They wanted the kind of slaves that the Europeans said that the kind of slaves that they wanted from Africa were Africans or slaves, people who could survive the transatlantic, because the transatlantic was rough and it was tough. That's the kind of slaves that they wanted coming to the New World. The brightest, the most brilliant slaves. That's the kind of slaves that they wanted. So the deal, so the Europeans went to Africa and made one deal with one African nation, and then the same deal that they made with that African nation went and made another deal with another African nation, and then another African nation, and another African nation. And if you read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, that was one of the ways in which Europe underdeveloped Africa, and also one of the ways in which they brought Africans from Africa to the New World and to the Caribbean in the 1600s. Of course, prior to the 1600s, slavery wasn't as elaborate because there was no transatlantic slave period when Christopher Columbus first came to the New World in the 1400s. The transatlantic started in the 1600s. That was when And it wasn't until between late 1500s into the 1600s that people start talking about race. But there is no concept of race before the 1500s. The concept of race coincided with the justification for Europe wanting to engage in the most heinous project, was to enslave a whole nation of people by first redefining them as property, redefining them as nobodies, as devils and demons, without sophistication, without religion. And when you study power, that's what power does. That's what people who tend to control, they redefine you as something else in order to manipulate you. Redefining the other as, and that's ethnocentrism as well. That's when you study ethnocentrism, or when you look at when you look at what ethnocentrism is, that's what ethnocentrism is. Devaluing the other based on your value, making a value judgment about somebody else. And that's what has come. And when you look at the Caribbean today, and when you look at part of Africa today and the world, there is the Europeanization of the new world, in a sense. We talk about this Britishness. Louise Bennett talk about this Britishness. Okay? Of this, okay, and one's ability to be able to speak European. The more fluent you are in European language, European ways, European traditions, even within the African milieu, it's the more accepted you are, in a sense. That is what has come to define Caribbean and Caribbean societies as well. And Homi Bhabha talks about that in her book, The Location of Culture, and Homi Bhabha is a post-colonialist, and is somebody that we must study when you study Caribbean thought, although she's from India. But when you start to look at the Indian context, you find that when you start to study the Commonwealth, there is this commonality in the Commonwealth. But the course surveys the history and philosophy of the Caribbean and the ways in which the Caribbean has emerged as a society in the shadow of colonialism and the emergence of neoliberal globalization. And I'm going to talk about, I can't wait to get to this topic when we start talking about the irony of globalization and how the Caribbean, it's important that we study history. They said that if you don't know where you're coming from, then you're going to make the same mistakes. And if I ask you, what is the Caribbean today? Yes, we're not we are not competitive. Economically, we're still developing. We have had missed opportunities. There's high crime and violence. We are united, but we are not as united in the kind of unity that is required in order for us to be competitive in the world. We talk about the Bandung Conference in the the Bandung Conference was what, in 1955? That was the Bandung Conference, when all the non-aligned global South countries, the colonial countries, all the nationalists, they all came together at this big conference with the dream of the nation, of everybody having an independent nation. But little did they know what was discussed in 1944, after World War II, when all the post-industrial countries came together to create a new world order in their eyes, of which the Caribbean is a part. Part of that world order saw the development of the IMDb, the World Trade Organization, and and the idea and the policy of structural adjustment that has helped to create the indebtedness of many Caribbean countries, that has allowed for penetration. And I'm going to talk about later in the lecture today, the issue of penetration is very important. Penetration, that is, okay, you think about it in sexual terms. Okay, who is being penetrated and who is doing the penetration? And when you start to study the economics and the societies of the global south, of which the Caribbean is a part, as against the global north, and you start to understand Caribbean position, and the history of the Caribbean, you started to look at it in terms of our penetration and, okay, our pregnability and the global north impregnability, and the strategy of facade that went into making us penetrable. I remember one time we're talking about export. Okay, we talk about the World Trade Organization, and it was easy to export. You know, we talk about exporting stuff. It was easy. We had to meet several criteria in order to export goods to the big country. But goods coming from the global north to the global south never had such criteria. We were part of a global strategy involving the World Trade Organization, okay, succumbing to certain rules that says you can't have unfair competition by investing in the local economy, by subsidizing your manufacturers and so on and so forth. But they were doing it in the big country, and they were already ahead. The Caribbean just coming into its own, setting a path of development, must now lock itself into agreements with other countries that were already developed and advanced. That makes no sense. Anyway, but we talk about that. The course examines the central ideological currents of 20th century political thought in the region and covers broad topics such as colonialism, nationalism, Pan-Africanism, socialism, Marxism, feminism, democratic socialism, neoconservatism, neoliberalism, globalization, deconstructivism, critical race theory, strategy, and the foundations of knowledge and the hegemony of faith, economic inequality, and poverty. You know, I said to all my previous classes that when I told one of my advisors, Martin Oppenheimer, that I was teaching this course at Jamaica Theological Seminary, he was shocked. He said, "You are teaching an activist course like this, a course that is about critical thinking and skepticism?" I'm like, yes. Because we are in the Caribbean and we are affected by discriminatory tactics in the world. When you start to study the Rastafari movement, it was a response, okay, to discrimination. It was a response to an affront, which was Rastafarianism started in the 1930s, but it was a response to colonialism and control. We'll talk about that. Among the thinkers and works that will be considered throughout the course are Marcus Garvey, George Padmore, C.L.R. James, V.S. Naipaul, West Benjamin, Michel Foucault, Frantz Fanon, Walter Rodney, Fidel Castro, Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, Bob Marley. Bob Marley just had a new movie that was just released recently. Kamal Brathwaite, Edward Glissant and the Negritude Movement, Homi Bhabha, Mike Davis, Nelson and Novella Keith, Stephanie Black, Jamaica Kincaid, Garnet Roper, Rex Nettleford, and of course the professor's work, which is yours truly. Themes will be drawn from a selection of contemporary newspaper columnists, talk show hosts, and ideas behind the major international agencies and institutions which have shaped post-independence policies. The selection of thinkers and social movements to be examined will vary with each semester. Now, the course also looks at the role of music. I don't know if we're going to get much time to look at that, but music is very important. And when you look at, many people look at Bob Marley as iconic. as a musical sensation, but to be honest, Bob Marley was a prophet. He was a prophet for his religion, Rastafarianism. Okay, so you have the Christian religion with its gospel and Christian music and its prophets. Bob Marley, in a sense, was seen as a, well, in a sense, well, not in a sense, he was a prophet, and who preached the message and the dogma and the doctrine of his faith. That was his religion. That was his faith. And music plays a very important role in when you study society, in Caribbean society. Even music was also a part of resistance, the struggle for independence. Okay, it was therapy as well, and it was escape. The arts and sports in carrying the spirit of resistance and in shaping and defining Caribbean identity. Louise Bennett was what Louise Bennett's poem, and her poem was revolutionary. It can be seen as her kind of resistance because she moved away from the periphery, from the center, to embracing the periphery. In other words, non-traditionalist ways of speaking, non-traditionalist ways of doing poetry and literature. When people eschewed and looked down on Caribbean vernacular and patois, she embraced it in her performances. That was her resistance, okay? Carrying Caribbean language and so on. And of course, so yeah, it's important to study the arts and music and sports. And in fact, if you study West Indies cricket, when you study West Indies cricket, and how study and you look at the leadership in West Indies the leadership in West Indies cricket, who could be captain and who couldn't. And it wasn't for years. You have great West Indian players, okay, but you couldn't be captain if you weren't brown skin or if you weren't white, okay. Okay, you study that kind of a thing. You talk about V.S. Naipaul, and Homi Bhabha talks about V.S. Naipaul in his writing, and how his stories, the characters in his books were like in Abyss Wall and so on. And we're going to reference some of these books, V.S. Naipaul's books. How these books, these literary genius moved away from the center to embracing the periphery, using language, tropes, images, characters that weren't the usual characters you've seen in books and the kind of language you will see. The course examines the role of the collective Christian presence and suggests a public theology priority for the church in the region, but also considers opportunities that takes advantage of science and technology and leveraging social media and digital technology as a way to express these critical thinking and ideas. Well, that particular last part I added. I don't know if I added that part because I believe that as people doing critical thinking, we have to also provide ourselves with a platform to share our thoughts and to have dialogue and conversation, and we have to take advantage of new technology, AI technology. What are our goals and the outcomes? Students will have an understanding of the outline of Caribbean history and slavery to the colonial period. I sent each of you and included on the platform an outline that traces Caribbean, beginning with Arawaks to African. Beginning with the Arawaks to Africans, and at some point we will peruse the document and we will go through it quickly. But that's a very important resource for you guys to have and to read and to explore and to do further readings, because that's just an outline. You can take the outline now and do more further reading from the outline I sent you guys I sent you an outline. I think you guys may have had it, you may have gotten it. Let me know if you haven't. That traces Caribbean thought and Caribbean thinking, but you'll have an understanding of that. You should already have an understanding of that from the document we sent, to understand the impact of that history on current reality. We talk about, when you study Caribbean, how far back do you go? Do you start in the 1960s, or do you start before that? And I say to you, the Caribbean is part of the New World. The Caribbean is part of an invention. Must begin with the inventor. The civilization within which the Caribbean is. We are in the Western civilization, driven by European thought that has been influenced by the Greco-Roman world. So so even now at Georgetown, where I am studying the foundations of knowledge, looking at starting from Seminary and Mesopotamia, and of course, and also reading books like Homer's Iliad, and moving into Augustine, and how Augustine writing was periphery, but it became central as ideas about God became sophisticated, and people became developed, and the church became an institution, because there was no institution. The church became institutionalized. The church developed a Roman identity, because it was competing for dominance with other faiths. So it found normative other writings that would support its dominance and its preeminence and privilege over any other. And that is institutionalism. That's what institutions are for. Okay. And even with the church, with its privileging of itself and the posturing of itself over other. The church has also came to support slavery, and have also helped to engender a bias from brainwash within Caribbean people, within Caribbean people, so that they look down on their own Afro-Caribbean beliefs, which we will study in this course as part of our research paper. So we want to understand the impact of that history. The impact of our colonial history is one where we have where our own history, where our own identity has been looked down upon by our own selves. Well, say for example, nothing black not good, and can I tell you, nothing black is still not good. Because when you start to study, when you start to ask people and to have reflections among Caribbean people about revivalists, you know, when I used to walk in Britain to look for one of my friends, and I used to notice a house with candles and cloth, and they said they were revivalists, and we were afraid of them because we thought they were associated with doppies and walk across the street. The way how we treat people who embrace Afro-Caribbean belief, we would look down on Rastas. We see them as dirty, and Rastafarianism as a fringe group. People who don't have a very good command of the English language. Okay, we look down on, you know, we talk about that kind of thing. The education system is one that promotes the traditionalist view, as what Homi Baba talks about, the tradition. And when he got into Oxford, it was the best, it was the highest thing, the greatest achievement, the ability to be able to get into a former colonial master's school was the greatest achievement that one could have. And it speaks to the lasting endurance of this colonial heritage that continue to treat the other as better than ourselves, the foreigner as better than ourselves. That continues to, we talk about, I asked the question, Frantz Fanon says in his famous writing, in Black Skin's White Mask, the Negro is not any more than the white man. That was from the 1950s. Does it still pertain today? Yes, it does. Because even within the own Negro, he is not. He still sees himself or things that come from him or his heritage as less than. We have to understand the impact of that history, the impact of history on current reality through debt, through structural adjustment. Understand and appreciate the influence of key historical and current figures. That's important. We have to understand and appreciate the influence of key historical and current figures. Say, for example, understand Frantz Fanon, understand George Padmore, understand Marcus Garvey, understand Michael Mann. Say, for example, Fidel Castro. I really thought that Fidel Castro was a terrorist. I really thought some of these nationalists and socialists were terrorists and crazies. They were crazies. Because of the kind of education system that we have, a Eurocentric education system that continued to promote, that continued to redefine people's struggles and fight for resistance as terroristic. Say, for example, I say to you what's going on in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was jailed. He was fighting against apartheid and he was jailed. Okay? Where was the world in all of this? We talk about life is what you make. Life is about people and how people relate. We talk about Haiti and we talk about Togo. Togo got independence, but they wanted their independence on their own terms, and they wanted to create a country that almost resembled the Swiss. The French would have none of it and did everything in their power, okay, by setting up other governments to fight against the other government, the local government. Yes, by asking them to pay huge sums of money in order for their independence to be recognized. And later on, when that didn't work, they assassinated the leader and installed their own leadership. The same thing happened in Haiti, the same thing happened in Grenada, the same thing would have happened in Jamaica. Okay? We talk about life is what you make it or what you allow others to make of it. We talk about, I'm going to ask you the question, what is the difference between Cuba, Haiti, as against Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados? What's the difference? What's the difference? What's the difference? I'm asking you guys, what's the difference? When you look at Cuba and Haiti, and you compare that with Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados, what's the difference? Huh? When you look at them, when you look at the economies of these places, Jamaica, compared to Cuba and Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados are economically better off than these other countries. Their independence is recognized. They are fairly involved in the world, on the world stage. Haiti and Cuba, not so much. Why? Why is that the case? Let's study the independence. What kind of independence? How did Cuba get their independence? As against, how did Jamaica, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago get their independence? When you study how these countries, these groups of countries got their independence and what pertains today, you will understand the point I'm making, the correlational value. The argument I'm making is a refreshing and remarkable one. It's a new one. It's quite remarkable. The point I'm making here. It's quite remarkable. It's quite remarkable. And so therefore, if I am to, okay, that's critical thinking. We're doing critical thinking. We're studying the cat. And if we are to do a study We can start an hypothesis, because that's what thinking is, you know. That's how you do. That's how you do. You get an epiphany, an epiphany. Yes, that's what you do. Okay, that's what you got, and you develop a theory, and from that theory, then you move it to its logical end. Okay, we talk about Haiti, and we talk about Cuba. We talk about Jamaica and those other three countries. Haiti and Cuba, very poor country compared to these other countries. Not as okay. They're very involved in the Caribbean. The Haiti and Cuba not as involved. Why is that the case? All right, let's look at their independence. How did they get in their independence? Cuba, Jamaica, and so on. Their independence the independence that they got was ceremonially gifted to them. The independence that these countries got was ceremonial. As against Cuba and Haiti, their independence was ceremonially gifted to them. They fought for their independence. They fought against the US. They fought against France. They fought against the post-industrial country or the status quo, the global leaders. They took their independence. So countries that fight against or get their independence on their own terms are today experiencing lack, backwardness, and extreme poverty. Let that settle for a little bit, for a minute. Jamaica could be like Haiti today, and Cuba. But maybe because we like lap dogs, we accepted the terms of our independence. And today we continue to pay homage to the Queen. Sorry, the King, or the mother country. So that's important. Goals and learning outcomes. Understand and appreciate how the history of the Caribbean shapes their own personal history. Understand specific ideologies that arose from the social and political realities of the Caribbean. Understand, again, specific ideologies. So, for example, again, Rastafarianism, that arose from the social and political realities. Okay? Attitudes towards certain positions. That comes from inherited ideologies. Understand the personal background of influencers of thought and its impact on their thinking. And influencers of thought and its impact on thinking. Analyze and evaluate the actions and ideologies of select thinkers. Appreciate their personal responsibility to advocate for the vulnerable in Caribbean societies. Appreciate the role of public theology in shaping thought and addressing issues of oppression and exploitation in the Caribbean. Public theology, and again, shaping thought and addressing issues. But has our public theology shaped? What thought has public theology shaped that addresses issues of oppression and exploitation in the Caribbean? The Baptist Church, and Paul Bogle was a Baptist, okay? So yeah, they were part of the resistance movement. The church was largely part of the resistance movement and helped to facilitate the resistance movement. And we have to be able to connect our personal story to the story of the region. We'll be able to utilize film to dissect and unveil the Caribbean story in relation to the global dynamics of the world. Say, for example, the film Life and Death. We will definitely watch that film, not this week, at some point in this course. We will watch that film as we begin to move into the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. We will begin to talk about that film. We will watch that film. And of course, we'll submit a final essay paper that is well researched and part of current thinking among young academics. We'll be able to use digital technology to transmit their critical thinking. Those are that's the outcome of what's this? That's the goal and learning outcomes. And of course, the student learning outcome is that The students on completion of the course will be able to develop their critical thinking and tell their own story of the Caribbean people, examine the issues of identity and color in relation to Caribbean history and colonization, explore poverty and inequality in the Caribbean as a direct result of neoliberal globalization, develop your thinking and writing towards developing a Caribbean perspective, trace the story of your own families as far back as possible, relate your personal history with that of Caribbean history, critically examining its impact on their family background, critically analyze, rethink the perspectives of key Caribbean and diaspora thinkers, and analyze their credibility for today and the future. Examine the role of religion in the defense of repudiation of slavery. Discuss ways in which society and you, the students, can advocate and act on behalf of the vulnerable and the oppressed. For example, we're going to consider the Haitian crisis and see how can we support Haiti and what they are going through. Discuss the church and your role in challenging structural injustice. Articulate your perspective on the Bible's relevance to the Caribbean context. Explore U.S.-Caribbean relations in shaping Caribbean and its diaspora. Consider the question, is there any hope for the Caribbean and Jamaica in light of Western capitalist penetration in the global South? And you will begin to explore mediums to express your thoughts, social media platform, podcasting, YouTube, writing letters to publishers and bloggers. And I'm going to ask that you guys start thinking about submit letters to the Gleaner, submit letters to the Observer, or to various mediums. Start podcasting or YouTubing or social media, share your thoughts, contribute to thought. Start doing so, very important. Of course, we're going to, the instructional procedures of the course, lectures, digital and multimedia presentations. We're not going to do much group work in this course because it's a small class. Weekly, we'll do group work as a group together. Weekly journals and interaction papers, I'm going to talk about that some more. Essays and quizzes, there's just one final essay. There's just one final essay and a midterm paper, that's it. And of course, the exam. That's the only, okay. Final essay, which is 40% of the grade. Final exam, which is 40% of the grade. 3 interaction paper, one of which is something that traces, that tells you your own story, that traces your own roots and identity. Who are you as a person? Where do you come from? It means you're gonna have to do your research, talk, and your source is going to be your own family, your birth records, your family, your church, your community. Have conversation with them. Who, where you're from, the complexity of your family, your roots, where you guys hail from. Are you from an African heritage, Indian, European, or are you tied to an indigenous? Is there a line of your? Is there a break in the line of your family? How far back can you go in determining your own family history? Okay, we will do that as an assignment that you guys will have to do. That's one of the 3 interact or reflections you have to do. So it's only 3 assignments. You'll do a midterm and a final research paper, and of course the exam. And of course the 3 interaction papers, 2 interacting with lectures and materials. 1 is something that traces your heritage and your roots. That's what you'll be required to do in terms of graded work. We will have cinematic film presentations, but we will provide 2 or 3 films for you guys to watch in this course. Assignment and graded work attendance. I have 15% here. We're going to change this. There are 13 classes that will cover the course. Materials, students' participation and attendance will attract a grade that counts towards the overall grade, and will get the maximum grade if they fully participate in the course by being on time, attending all classes and meeting all deadlines and timelines. Students should communicate with their lecturer ahead of time if they are having any difficulty meeting deadlines. Weekly interaction paper, I said this. Now, ignore this section, please. It says weekly interaction paper 5%. No, there's only 3 interaction paper. You have the luxury. You can choose any week you want to present, but I need 3 interaction paper, 1 to 2 pages interacting with the material or the class that you have done. We're going to next week I will discuss at the beginning of the class how I would like you guys to submit your interaction paper. What's an interaction paper? What goes into the interaction paper? How I would like you to submit your interaction paper. So no interaction paper is due at this time, but I will tell you what is required and what I'm expecting from the interaction paper that you guys will submit. But in terms of the film, we're going to do we're going to watch Who Shot the Sheriff, Born for Dead, Story of the Maroons, History of Reggae, Dirty Pretty Things. There's one on corruption. We will not watch 12 Years of Slavery, but we will watch Life and Death. Those are the films for the class. Again, Life and Death, Corruption, Dirty Pretty Things, The History of Reggae, Story of the Maroons, Born for Dead, and Who Shot the Sheriff. That's the film we're going to be watching for the class.
Sorry, sir. In terms of the films, you are going to provide them here, right? We won't have to source them on our own.
Yeah, I will present them, but if you guys want to source it and watch it ahead, that's fine. You are free to do so, but we will watch them in the class.
Okay.
We will watch them in the class and discuss it. And in terms of 10% of the grade, here we go. 10% of the grade will be based on attendance and participation. The students will be required to submit at least. By the way, I have Grammarly on my, so Grammarly corrects everything. So please excuse the highlights. You might be seeing highlights right now. Are you guys seeing the highlights?
Not at all.
Oh, okay, great. The students will be required to submit at least 3 1- to 2-page interaction papers interacting with the weekly class lectures and materials. The professor will expound on this later, and I'm expounding on it now. Okay, so the first one you do is just one where you trace your heritage. You will not do so this week. I guess you will do. Week after next, you can present that one. Midterm paper, 10% of the grade. 10% of the grade will be determined by an 8 to 10-page proposal paper in which the student interacts with and submit a proposal essay paper of the final paper. Now, the final paper, I will talk about the final paper. So, midterm is, let me see, when is midterm? Midterm is sometime in March. So sometime in March, like say by March 15. By March 15, and I'll add it. March 15, you guys are supposed to submit a midterm paper, which is a proposal of your final paper. And the proposal should include a methodology, expounding your final paper, which is everybody's going to do the same question. Everyone is going to do the same question. So I will talk about that in a little bit. And I have an example of a proposal that is available, that is attached. It's attached to the updated syllabus. So the syllabus that I sent you previously before today never had this. So I sent you new syllabuses in an email, and also it's attached a new one and deleted the old one from the JTS online platform. And it shows it's updated. Okay, so you guys have to just make note of that. But I'll talk about the proposal a little bit in a second. But let's talk about the final research paper, because the midterm has to do with the final. 40% of the final research paper, 40% of your grade will be determined by a 20 to 25-page essay paper, which is really a findings paper, which the students will be required to complete and submit by the final day of the term. The research paper will be an exploration. Now listen to this, very important. The research paper will be an exploration of the changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. Again, the research paper will be an exploration of the changing attitudes towards Afro-Caribbean beliefs. where the student will conduct a survey among his community, church, and or school and work, your sphere, amongst your peoples, your community where you interact and you live and work and go to school and so on, among your peers, of how attitudes are changing, and provide your findings.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, sir. Does that say 20 to 25 pages?
Yes.
Very, very good question.
Yes. Is that too much?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
But you guys only have 3. You guys only are doing an exam, a final research paper, and a midterm
Sir,
paper.
I
That's it.
struggle to,
Oh, and
struggle
3.
to write a 8 to 10 page paper.
The 8 to 10 pages midterm.
Yes, I struggle. And I talk a lot, so I don't know how the 25 will go.
But turn your talking into words. Trust me. Write what you are saying, and you will find the word. But okay, no. Actually, please remember now, it's guided. The final paper is guided. It's a guided paper. It's a guided paper, actually. It's a guided paper. What you're doing is you're doing research. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm going to come back to the research because probably today's class I may not have time to go. I might have only 30 minutes to go through the lecture, but that's fine because I want to go through the research paper and make a presentation as it relates to the research paper. So I might change my lecture for today and go into something else. But